All right, all right. I think we are ready to roll here. Hey Jesse, hey Connor, what's up?
Hello.
Jesse, I'm not sure we can hear you.
What about now?
Now we got
Let's
you.
go. Here we are.
Let's do it. Here we are. We made it. Yeah. Thanks for joining. Thanks for everyone checking in live and checking in async. So yeah, we are here as part of 100 Builders. We're recording with Jesse Pollock and Connor Rule, and yeah, we are going to be talking today about the importance of building open tech in AI and crypto. I think something that these two have a lot to say about. Um, and yeah, just as a reminder, like we have builders spread out all over the world, so we have people in this program that are definitely going to be watching on their own time, and people that are here are going to be asking questions. So we're just going to have a casual builder chat today and let it roll. So I guess with no further ado, let's introduce these two. I think for anyone who doesn't know, so maybe let's start with you, Connor. Maybe just give a quick hello, what you do at Stability, and I guess I'll also ask you what kind of makes you personally passionate about this stuff, about building open tech.
Yeah, sure. My name is Connor. I work as an engineer at Stability, and I'm kind of in the side of the company that, there's a whole organization that basically compresses the world into a big set of weights, a model, and then the stuff I do is really taking the model and pushing it out and distributing it. So that's like APIs, SDKs, developer documentation, sandboxes, and some user interface stuff. So kind of where the model actually gets applied in products and apps. So, and yeah, I'm really passionate about open source AI. I'm before this last year, trying to do anything meaningful in AI just felt a lot harder. So it's just been wild seeing, yesterday was 1 year anniversary of Stable Diffusion, and it has just been an incredible year of watching just thousands and thousands and thousands of projects take off that wouldn't have otherwise. And so, yeah, that explosion is what really excites me.
Nice. And you have a dog that just joined us for the chat, so that's how we know we were starting to create some builder energy already. Sweet. But Jesse, yeah, what's up?
I'm Jesse. Hey everyone. I'm the creator of Base, which is the open source Ethereum layer 2, built and incubated by Coinbase. We've been working for the last couple of years on it, and we just opened up mainnet about 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago. Good morning, everyone. GM, glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I mean, I think our general perspective is that the future of the internet is going to be built on chain. It's going to be open source. It's going to be available to everyone, everywhere in the world. And we're excited to support the next generation of builders who are making that happen. So grateful to be here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one question I wanted to lead off with, because obviously a lot of the people that we are working with are builders. I think oftentimes really early stage, creating something open source, going 0 to 1, and a lot of it is about we talk a lot about builder energy. So how do you create something that attracts other builders to it and gets them excited? And I know that the both of you are kind of on the cutting edge. I think Jesse, the goal of Base is to bring 1 million developers on chain, and Connor, as you said, you're right at the interface between kind of all these new models and developers. So I'd love to just ask you, how do you think about attracting builder energy to what you're doing? Like what have you seen work? How would you advise anyone who is kind of doing that, especially at the early stages? Maybe Connor, I'll kick it to you first.
Yeah, if you're just getting started, I don't think there's ever been a time like this in AI where it's been so approachable just for the average developer. I feel like a couple of years ago, using anything AI in your projects would have been its own research task. Just the interfaces you'd have to deal with, the knowledge you'd have to get anything set up was pretty immense. And nowadays, you can pull off any number of libraries and just start hacking away at stuff. A lot of this incredible capability, like you think about some of these models, and they represent like huge amounts of money, time, compute, energy, data collection, all gets packed into this one, artifact that you can just bring into your project, basically. And not only bring into your project, but there's libraries around it that are nicely typed. So creating a button that generates an image is just super easy. So there's really never been a better time to just play around with this stuff. And, when I think about builder energy, what that means to me, it's like, what's the distance between thinking, oh, this would be cool, and then the cool thing exists. And every day it feels like that's shrinking further, at least in AI land. So yeah, just try stuff. It really is right there for you to, integrate with.
Yeah, I love that description of that being, it's almost like the catalyst for builder energy is like the delta between idea and reality being really, really small. And it's funny that you describe AI in that way, because in a lot of ways I see crypto, like it feels like we're in a similar trajectory with crypto, where for a long time it's been like pretty hard to build things and like a little inaccessible, and products that you could build were only accessible to a small percentage of the world. And then just in the last like 6 to 12 months with low cost layer twos, with a bunch of the kind of infrastructure around wallets and MPC wallets that are kind of pulled behind easy authentication methods, all maturing. It's like now, if you're like a 1-person team or a 2-person team, you can build things in crypto and they just work, and they can work for the whole world's population. They can leverage this incredible platform, and you can do it in like weeks or days. And I think that it's definitely closed the delta to the point where I feel like we're seeing more and more and more builder energy in crypto, and more builders. It's like unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It feels like right now, even as the prices of crypto are a little bit down from their all-time highs, the energy from builders and the level of innovation that's happening feels like it's actually at an all-time high. And like folks are really leaning in. In terms of yeah, go for it.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say there's a great quote I saw on Twitter the other day that if you're an ideas guy, it's just never been better. Like you can just, as you said, go 0 to 1 on anything just so much quicker.
It's so true. And so much like oftentimes you don't even need to be an engineer, right? Like with crypto, like you can do so much. And with AI, with both of these things, it's like you can combine crypto and AI. You can get so far down this path of like shipping something even before you write a line of code. And you can accept payments, you can interact with people's identity. Like there's literally whole worlds you can build without ever writing code. I think that is this like crazy unlock for ideas guys, and girls and people all over the world to actually like get building. We actually just did a hackathon at Coinbase, the on-chain summer hackathon. It was like, let's capture this energy, get people to build on-chain. And one of the things I loved most was there was a big chunk of our like business, or not a big chunk, there was a team of people on the business development team, and they using AI plus just like out of the box AIs, they built a whole out of the box APIs, they built a whole product on Base. It's like a 3-person, like they'd never written a line of code before. And in 2 days they built a whole product. And I was like, excuse me? Like, you did what? This is freaking awesome. And I think we're going to see more and more and more of that. It's really epic. I feel so lucky that we all get to be here at this moment. It's like experiencing what feels like a massive revolution in the way everything works.
Totally. I mean, I think there's some super interesting kind of parallels, and it does feel like, I mean, I had this experience like reviewing all of these applications of this program, like the kinds of things that people are doing with tiny teams now is insane. I mean, like full end-to-end products, like 1 or 2-person team. And so I'm curious, like, because you guys are, kind of, designing a lot of the technology that people are building on top of. So like you said, that the limiting reagent is the ideas in a way. Like if you have a really solid idea and, at least some kind of amount of technical, like, capability, like you can really bring amazing things to life now. So how do you, I know that both of, you've done some work to kind of nudge people towards ideas that you think are interesting. I'm curious, like, what has it been like so far? Has it had a lot of the ideas that kind of get built to like, oh yeah, we had an idea around that. That's so great to see. Or it's like, oh, we had no idea this was even possible. Like we were not even thinking about this direction. Like what have you seen so far? And also like, how do you think about that going forward? Do you think it's a lot of work that you'll have to do to kind of show people what's possible, or is it really just get people the tech and kind of, see what they can dream up?
Yeah, it's interesting because I assume a lot of people in this room have seen it, but we just launched Base Mainnet. We've been kind of like pushing this movement on-chain summer, and we internally built a whole product experience around it. Like you can go to onchainsummer.xyz, and every day there's like one cool thing to do on-chain. We worked with a bunch of people to kind of curate those things, and we've seen a ton of really good kind of like activity and people getting excited about that. But then alongside that, there's been a bunch of things that like we did not plan, right? Like we didn't plan like Base Paint to be like this like really incredible viral experience that people are contributing to. We didn't plan Friend Tech to be like, you know, taking over the internet by storm. And I think it's been like refreshing and inspiring to feel that way of like, oh, like we planned a bunch of stuff, but in many ways the stuff that we didn't plan is the stuff that's actually like captured more of the attention and captured more of the activity and captured more of the kind of energy in the community. I think one thing that I do feel some like I get like to take a little bit of credit for is our intent was to make fun on chain happen. Like that, when we started thinking about this concept of on-chain summer, it was like the technology's ready and it's summer. Like let's like show a bunch of fun and like show people that this isn't just this scary technology. It's not just this financial thing. It's like real, it's useful, it's cool. It's a thing that like everyday people can engage with. And I think a lot of that intent is showing up in what people build. And so I would say I feel like very little confidence that I can predict what like the exact thing that people should build is, or be like, here's this idea, you should go build that. Like no shot. But in terms of like the themes, I feel like injecting this like ethos of like, we want to be building fun on chain. We want to be building consumer products on chain. We want to be building things that like everyday people think are just freaking cool, and that brings them into this new platform and gets to experience it for the first time. Like that, I feel like is an intent that we're really like pushing. And I think it's having a positive impact. And I'm optimistic that a lot of people are, you know, obviously we're going to continue building the financial stuff. We're going to continue building like the other hard tech stuff. But I think that shift of like, oh no, now we can do fun stuff too. We can do consumer stuff too. I think is really important.
Yeah, and definitely in AI, the exact same thing is true where like we're just overwhelmed by the amount of stuff people are doing on a day-to-day basis. On both the output side, people using the stuff to do creative things. It's like every day it's like that's something that's cool that didn't exist. I mean, I see so many examples of people doing like these one-off art projects that are just impossible to imagine doing, like sort of in a pre-AI enabled world. But also on the tech side, as a company, we often get blindsided by these amazing advances that happen just out in the community. It's like, wow, this model being out in the open exposes us to just huge upside in good ideas. You know, people you have no idea exist will come out of nowhere and just have a great idea that just changes the game. I mean, you know, whether it was in the beginning, you think you might have to do face fine tuning, like to get really good results out of the model, and somebody comes out with Dream Booth or ControlNet. Like there's these technologies that seem to just like emerge out of the community that just absolutely would not happen if it wasn't something that people could tinker with. So an abundance of playing around. So I'm not worried about there being a lack of ideas and people messing around with things.
Yeah, totally. I mean, maybe we can even ask like the flip side question, because from a, you know, on the other side of the coin, as a builder, if you are, let's say you're building by yourself or maybe with a small team, like there's such an explosion of people building around these areas that I think what we hear oftentimes is like people feel a little bit lost, maybe like, you know, not sure how to kind of find their footing because they're one of, you know, tons of people that are, I don't know, maybe you're a tool or something, or like, and genuinely innovative, interesting stuff. But these spaces for builders at really early stages are crowded in a great way, in a way that I think creates a lot of energy, but that also I think tends to like, you know, some people kind of feel lost. So because both of you work with, I know that you put a ton of time into working with teams that are kind of like building on what you're doing. So I guess how would you think about that? Have you seen, you know, ways that teams are kind of navigating that maze, or any recommendations you have to people that are kind of just looking to find traction, like, you know, move forward?
Yeah, I think the base reality hasn't changed too much, even though the technology is changing very fast. Like ultimately, if you're trying to work on a project, it's got to be aimed at some like real world problem somebody has, or just making them happier or entertained, like those base level primitives just are still there. It's like you still have to be very good about sniffing out, like, I see people having this pain and need to make them a tool that helps with it, but I'm going to apply these technologies, which are brand new. That fundamental loop of like observing the world, predicting a way you can make it better, running the test is still there, just highly accelerated. How to deal with the amount of stuff coming out day by day is still a mystery to me. I would love an answer for that, but don't think those core skills though are wasted. Like you really still, it's just being in tune with the people you're trying to like either entertain, make happy, or solve problems for.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think anything's fundamentally changed about the ability to like find and the need to find product market fit, which is like a hard, grueling process. I think that like the advice that I have is because of the way these tools have compressed like how long it takes to build things and how much like leverage you can get from building things. I think that there is like almost maybe even more of an emphasis on that ability to find like a real product and build a real product that people have or that people want. And I think the like feedback that I have is like, don't be afraid to ship things. Just like ship faster than you are comfortable. And in maybe products that aren't perfect, and just get them in the hands of everyday people. I think Friendtech is like a great example of this. It's like you open up the Friendtech app and you're like, this is crazy that people are using this. Like, there's parts of it where it's just like it's slow at times. It has issues. The UI isn't perfect, but I think the thing that I've seen that team do is they just ship. They like put it out there. They have like good viral loops, and then they keep making it better and just keep iterating on it, kind of like right before our eyes. And I love that energy. I think that that's really important energy for any builder. It's like ship the thing that's a little uncomfortable and then iterate on it. Yeah, I mean, even at Coinbase, that's the energy we've been trying to bring this summer. Like we did a bunch of work to try and make on-chain summer.xyz really smooth and try and make it really smooth in our consumer products like Coinbase and Coinbase Wallet, so you could actually go through the whole flow. And we prepped a lot, but then we also ran into a bunch of issues when we started actually having everyday people run through this whole experience. And so what we've been doing every day is like we do a retro every day, and it's like, what did we learn today? What about the experience worked? What didn't work? How do we make sure that we can fix it tomorrow? How do we make like incremental improvements day over day, week over week? And I think that that's been a really like positive cultural kind of energy injection where it's like, oh, we don't need to wait weeks or months or years to change these things. It's like we can learn every day, and we can figure out like how do we make this stuff actually work better for everyday people.
And then one more piece of advice I'd give is there's an internal loop that you have that kind of mirrors this external loop when you're trying to build a product. Like you are kind of always going to be your most important customer. And if you are struggling to figure out exactly like what to do or how to stay up to date, spend some time just like upgrading your productivity stack. Like sit down and think like, what things do you actually hate doing in the day or do you do a lot of that you could find tooling around you that just makes better the whole experience? Like I recently switched to Cursor, which is like a VS Code fork that has just a lot more AI enabled features. And prior to that, I was just using like ChatGPT plus VS Code and Copilot, like just that tiny little, I took about 15 minutes to kind of look around and see, okay, like, are there any tools I could be using right now that make just my day-to-day better? Don't be afraid to make those upgrades and treat yourself as like the number one customer. So it's worth it. Like those pay real dividends.
I got to learn more about Cursor. Does it work well?
Yeah, I've been,
Is it easy to use?
I feel like more and more of my life is being spent like just commanding machines to do stuff in English. And that has just really escalated the trend, like highlighting a segment of code and being like, okay, just make this suck less. Or like, I mean, literally my instructions will be that bad and simple. It'll be like, okay, this button looks terrible. I want it to do this. And then it does it, And
it's like an open source fork of VS Code?
It is a fork of VS Code. I'm actually not sure if it's open source or not, but I'm at least playing around with it. It's cool. What I'm using for my non-work projects at the moment.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell my teams to check it out. That sounds awesome. Yeah. We've been making a big push right now on using AI tools at Coinbase, particularly for engineers. Brian, our CEO, just sent a message. I think like 3 days ago. He was like, what was it? Like everyone needs to get onboarded to what's it called? ChatGPT for Copilot for writing code, because we now have it all like set up internally to be whatever private and set up. And he's like, 100% of engineers need to be onboarded by the end of the week, otherwise I'm going to start messaging people. It's like, okay. I actually think it's the right intuition. Like from me talking to engineers on my team, it's like, you know, there's a little resistance always, but people are like, this has totally changed my productivity. It's like I'm twice as productive. So I like that top-down mandate.
Totally. I mean, it feels like there's a meta point here, which is obviously like so much of the inspiration for us building this program, which is just like, as if you can like run really tight iteration loops, whether you're a big company like Coinbase or whether you're, you know, a 2-person team building something new, like the capabilities for you to improve everything, you know, including how you build, but also what you build. There's just so much out there. There's so many, you know, integrating something AI into your product or, you know, into your workflow or whatever, building on a different, you know, like part of the crypto infrastructure. Like there is just so much that you can do to move forward, to make progress. And so in some ways it's just kind of the basics, like the basic mechanic of like, how fast can you ship and iterate and learn from people and just make it better. And, you know, I guess that's old as time, but it seems like, you know, true now more than ever. And I guess maybe that's like that's for us, that's why we are so big on just building in the open, because I think there are these amazing benefits that you get from running that kind of like iteration loop in a public way, or like you said, as you know, ship as uncomfortable as you can be with, you know, being early, and also I think as uncomfortable as you can be with being public about what you're doing, because there are this serendipity that comes from that. And so I'm curious, to maybe ask you some questions about open tech in general, because obviously that's part of why we're here today is to talk about why, you know, open tech matters. And I kind of curious, one of the questions I have is for both of you. I think what we've, you know, Stability is kind of leading the way with open source AI, right? So, and I think that's going to be super important, especially as you know, maybe right now developers are getting onboarded to using AI code, but at some point governments are going to get onboarded to, you know, leveraging AI models to do stuff, right? And that's going to be massive, and they're going to want, you know, to be able to go out and test that code and make sure they can really trust it. And so open source is huge for that. And you know, Jesse, I think Base is doing a huge amount of work to continue to kind of propagate this Ethereum ecosystem and to bring more scalability to that via layer 2s and things like that. And one of the kind of, I think, ramifications of that is that these ecosystems that are built, that are open, they tend to become, or they can become really massive. And so the people that are, you know, responsible for shaping them, you know, then you play like a huge role in kind of shaping that ecosystem. So in some ways they are decentralizing, because they are, you know, you can do so much with them, but in some ways they are themselves as an ecosystem, sort of, they take over a lot of stuff. So because both your kind of organizations are really close to that topic. So I'm just curious kind of how you both think about that as you build.
Yeah, sure. The concept of the community kind of taking over is something, like, at least in the Stable Diffusion world, has been true from day one. Like, the second a model goes out, the weights just exist in the world. What happens from that point forward is really unpredictable. Like, so that's why there's just a ton of effort that goes into making sure a lot of these releases are the best we can make them, because we know that the second the community has you know, the ability to mess around with it, it kind of sets that foundation for a lot of like fine-tuning efforts and derivative technology. Basically, the applied team at Stability, which is led by Joe Penna, like, they really poured their heart and soul into this SDXL release recently. And I think, you know, that effort is going to manifest as like, did the model do well enough that it starts to become a new community standard and is the base for a lot of further fine tuning? We really don't know if that's going to be the case ahead of time. It's just, was it good enough? I think it was and is becoming that base, but like, that's something we have to think about quite often, is like, when you produce these things that just go out into the world and you kind of do give them to the community to run with, you kind of have to encode your values and your goals into that release, because you kind of lose the ability to actively manage it once it's out there, which I think is a great thing in general. The fact that we cannot take that back from people, I think, is actually really liberating. But it really does impact how you think about these releases. So
it's so funny. There's so much commonality between the AI and blockchain, on-chain, because it's the same thing with crypto. I mean, we don't have quite the same. I mean, we kind of do, like, right? Like every release or every upgrade of a chain, you add new features, and you can never take those back. Like, because once it's out in the world, like it's out there and it's out there forever. Like Base is an open permissionless network, and if you put something on Base, it will be there forever. And any feature that we add will be there forever because it has to support everything kind of in perpetuity. And so I think it's a similar thing where, it's almost not like a culture that we want to set where it's like, oh, we believe that the culture should be open. It's like, no, like that is set on us. The technology is fundamentally open. It is like as open as it can be. Like every line of code that is written and deployed to Base is public record and open source. And not all actually open source in terms of like being MIT licensed or freely available. Like you can license things as you want, but it's visible. And I think I was talking to an engineer about this the other day who's working on Base. I feel like it's like that nature of on-chain engineering where everything is open is like a totally new paradigm, right? We've operated for the last many decades where it's like everything's closed, right? Like you don't know Google's systems, like, unless you work there, like, and they write papers about them and people write technical blog posts, but like the default is closed. And now on chain, the default is, everything must be open. And so that means that like you can write one piece of code that you put on chain and then everyone in the world sees it and it can change everyone's worldview or change everyone's way they work or change everyone's way they write their own code. And I think that is like, yeah, it's bigger than just a culture we're trying to set. It's just a fundamental nature of this platform. And it's a thing that we necessarily need to embrace. And so on the Base side, like we're doing a bunch of things to Base. Like pretty much everything we're doing is open source. Like OnChainSummer.xyz, we open source that. All of our smart contracts are open source. We're working right now to open source base.org and the bridge interface. And we want to lean into this kind of ethos of open source where it's like, if all the chain's going to be open source and that's where most of the stuff's going to live, like everything kind of downstream or upstream of that should also be open source. And I think it's leading to a lot of cool stuff that we, can't always anticipate. But when you put things out in the open, people come. It creates that builder energy. It gets people excited. So we're excited. We're excited for this next generation of the internet that is fundamentally more open.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would question, I'm not even sure we have time to get into, but I was thinking about in prep for this call is that I think it feels like even the landscape of what open source means is evolving. Like if you take AI as an example, like there's, the models themselves are open source and the weights and there's all these different, like you could almost, it's more of a gradient, it's a spectrum. And I think it's the same in crypto. It's like, a lot of people that, even apply to 100 builders, it's like, well, we are deploying some smart contract, and we have a bunch of media that is kind of open. It's like open data, but maybe there's a product that's like leveraging that data that's itself, not open source. And so it's like, there's so many different flavors of what open, you can almost get lost in that, but it does feel like if you just zoom out, it's like the whole arc of everything just feels like it's moving towards openness. And I think, riding that wave. So it's a simpler, I guess. I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but.
No, I think that's right. And I think like there's because the underlying platform is open, it kind of bleeds up into everything else. Like you can only build there's only so much closedness you can have on apps built on top of on-chain products or smart contracts because the core logic is all open. And so I think that is like, if you think about the past world, I feel like there were a lot of forces that like naturally drew us towards centralization and naturally drew us towards closedness. Like that was where the inertia was. And that was because we were building on top of centralized platforms that were fundamentally closed. And now with open blockchains, we're building on top of open platforms that are fundamentally public. And I think that means that the inertia is actually the exact opposite, where even if things start closed, they'll open over time because their core logic and like the heart of them is open. And it's a paradigm shift. And I think it means that a lot of the like past expectations, mental models, like ways of working are not going to match. They're not going to map. And we're going to start seeing new things emerge, new trends.
In AI, it's tricky. This spectrum of open source is something I feel like every time there's a model release there is like at least some group of people who wishes one aspect of it was more open. There's groups like inside the company who have, their own desires. Like if you're a researcher who's trying to iterate, you don't want maybe everything you're doing to be public because you're learning or making mistakes. It's like, what is that balance? The way I think about it is once these weights exist in the world, it really does represent like just a raw capability. Like if you have the GPU, you are granted this capability. And I think open source is like the thing that we will always strive towards, at least at Stability. It's like that's the end goal. There's parts of that stack that could or could not be open, but like as long as the model you get is something that you can have, you can run, it's on your hardware, that we can't take that back. Like that's what I feel really good about personally. It's you think about a lot of the AI systems that are out there today. At any moment, you could be restricted from Midjourney or ChatGPT, or your access to this power can be taken. To me, the moment where we put weights into the world really is like the crucial moment. Like that's the moment I think people should really pay attention to, because once they're out there, it's something we can't untake. It's like Prometheus stealing fire, right? Like you can't take it back. And I do think there's a worrying trend right now in just the larger compute ecosystem where it's getting harder to get chips. Models are basically being created and designed to run on bigger and bigger GPUs, which are harder and harder for consumers to run. So I'm a little worried about the trend we're seeing where like the state of the art is moving into more specialized hardware and chips that are not really accessible to normal people. So, as long as I really think you need somebody like Stability was really focused with SDXL on making sure that model fits on a consumer grade hardware so that individual people could be the users of that thing. So I think what's the point of a big open source model if nobody can run it unless you have gigantic, data centers? Like that's just not the world we want to live in. So like striking that balance is going to be very tricky as time goes on. But I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of on us, not just the company, but the whole community to keep the state of the art in a way that we can run it locally. Like that's not a guaranteed outcome. It's going to take a lot of effort to do that.
It's so funny or not funny, but it's just so interesting to see the parallels between that and crypto, right? Like you could swap pretty much everything that you're saying for people talking about Ethereum and the importance of being able to run an Ethereum node on your local computer. Like that is the whole, like that's like the core tenet basically of Ethereum, is that like we have to keep the resource requirements and the decentralization openness of the software such that anyone can run a node. And that's really different. That's different than other chains, right? Like if you look at other chains, a lot of them have optimized for like much higher hardware requirements, which make it inaccessible for most people to run nodes because they're like, oh, this isn't as important. But it's interesting to see how you have that same parallel across both crypto and AI.
Yeah, it's like same thing with Ethereum, where if that gets out of whack, then suddenly all the nodes are in Amazon because that's where the hardware people can use is, and then
right.
Doesn't look very centralized. The same thing is true with AI chips right now. Like, I don't know how we're going to figure that out as a global community, but I do think we need to be thinking about ways to like use compute in a distributed way that basically gives people the same power that you might have as a large data center. So something I'm pretty interested in, don't have a good answer to.
Well, I feel better already, knowing that you guys are thinking about it. It's, but I want to make sure we, as we kind of wind towards the end here, I think, if people who are checking out live have any questions, drop them into the chat so that we can get to them. But I wanted to ask you a bit more of some fun questions. So we're talking to, there's a couple hundred builders, in this program. There's probably many more out there, hopefully, that we can, reach. And so I'm just curious, what are you excited to see people build? What have you seen people build recently that has gotten you really fired up? Anything that we can give people just a taste of some energy of what you're kind of seeing at the cutting edge. as people are thinking about what they're building.
Yeah, and the open source side of things, or at least in AI, I'll answer in two categories. There's sort of like community tooling that enables a bunch of stuff to be created. Most recent example of that is the Comfy UI project. The creator of Comfy UI actually now works at Stability, so I'm a little bit biased in this, but it's very cool. It's like a node-based editor for inference that allows you to sort of mix and match workflows and how models are actually running in a way that just allows you to like really customize how this stuff is actually operating on your own machine. The existence of tools like that can enable like entirely new workflows, entirely new, modes of inference we just couldn't have imagined. So like, that's a great example of a project that like basically was one person's brainchild and is now enabling a huge amount of iteration and just growth in ideas in that space. So, in terms of like the open source tools that enable like cool futures, that kind of stuff, you really can build and contribute to the larger community. And just in general, like a more general answer to the second part is people using the stuff to create like artistic outputs and like just actual experiences like that. That's been another thing I just love watching. Like some of the first videos that are being stitched together with text to image to video and text to audio now. Like it's totally cool to just be producing art in this era too. Like that anything you can do to contribute sort of to that body of work as well is, I think, inherently, worth it. So much exciting stuff there. It's hard to pick one particular thing.
That's great.
Yeah, on the on-chain side, I think a lot of what I'm excited about, like, and I mentioned earlier, is people building consumer products. So games, social products, media products, things like Base Paint, things like Friendtech, that really feel like they're fun, engaging. They're things that people want to come on chain to do, like everyday people want to come on chain to do. And so I think like leaning into that, leaning in to figure out like how do you build something that like your friend or your sibling or your coworker, family member wants to use. That's probably where I'd start. And I think a lot of this is just possible because of layer twos and because of how cheap they are. You can really do things in a way that like it wasn't possible even just a year ago. And so this possibility space is basically endless. And I think there's a lot of infrastructure out there that can make it so you can get started really quickly. And so it's just mostly up to people getting started building.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts. We've saw a bunch of applications. Actually, there's a bunch of people in the program that are doing both. Like we're talking, a lot about on-chain stuff, AI stuff. I think it's clear from this conversation that both of those are becoming real, like consumer grade tech. Much easier to use. And I think the explosion of things at the intersection is. There's some cool games in the program that are doing something with AI and leveraging blockchains in some aspect as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I'm super pumped up to see that intersection.
I think there's a ton of cool stuff at the intersection. There's a company that's building on Base called Parallel, which has created like a trading card game, an on-chain trading card game, like TCG, and that's like it's in private beta right now. It's growing really quickly and people love it, but they also have built this whole, like, they have a whole universe that the trading card game is in, and they're right now building another game called Colony, which is uses AI, and it basically like every character in the game is agent, and every character in the game is also an ERC 65551 or 6551 NFT that can kind of like gain different skills and gain different assets, and it's basically just a whole world building game that's like an MMORPG, but everything's AI. And I've been watching them kind of like iterate on it, and it's really like insane. I look at it as like this was impossible to build even just like a year ago, and now it's very, very possible. And they're actually building it as the L3 on top of Base. I see someone asked, does Base have plans to build an L3 app chain ecosystem on top of their L2? The answer is yes. We're helping people do that, particularly games. And this is one of the examples of that. And there's gonna be a lot more. So yeah, absolutely, come build with us.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know if this is alpha, but I was, talking with Connor before we started the chat, and Connor was showing me some of the things you can do from taking like sort of, pixelated images or whatever and turning them into these, interactive worlds basically. And it was, I don't know, it just seems like there's so much that you can do there. There's so much interesting, on-chain art that's being created, and taking that and like building worlds and stories and narratives with that with AI seems, I mean, super powerful. So
Yeah, I was just talking to talking with another organization that is building a whole product that's just that. It's like you can take existing on-chain assets and then you can use AI to remix them, and then all of the kind of like proceeds can be like attributed to where the original assets came from and who created them, and you can do kind of splits based on that. And so I think we're like literally on the verge of the most incredible creative revolution ever, powered by AI and crypto.
Yeah, and what's nice about AI and crypto is that it's like an inherently small format. When you think about a prompt, a single sentence can be expanded into like a beautiful image, right? And that just innately gives you this ability to encode that kind of like complexity, but in just, sentence form on something on a like platform where memory really does matter, right? And they're both general purpose technologies, right? So AI, crypto, like they're both going to be in all sorts of places in little ways, I think. But they do share a lot of commonality. Like, how do you give people royalties, right, for, let's say, running a model that's using their data? That's a pretty hard question to answer, and I think one that's going to become more and more important over time. There's intersections there. Like, how can we allow like private models to be run in a way that's like not exposing those weights? Like if you're an artist who wants to like basically enable people to create stuff particularly in your style, like how can you do that in such a way that like you can directly benefit economically? That's a problem like we're going to solve at some point, and I think the world's going to be a lot better for that. So like, let's get on it.
Yeah,
let's get building.
Let's get building. I mean, that was one thought I had over the last few days watching this kind of friend tech. I mean, for anyone who hasn't been aware, there's one of the kind of apps that got built on Base after launch is this product friend tech, where you can essentially kind of like buy shares in your friends and you get access to this private chat. And I mean, the app itself was, I think, incredible for the reason that you mentioned, Jesse, was just like how fast it can go from 0 to 1 and iterate and whatever. But it was also for me a moment where like so much of the ecosystem around it was built so fast, like in days. Like there's all these different ways that you can create a fraction version of your shares. Someone like sent me like a shares that vest over time, like it's a company. And so it was just that moment where you realize like, wow, this is like financial infrastructure, all the bits and pieces of it now that developers can take and just map to whatever they want in literally hours. And it's so kind of like that entire financial stack, and then you take like AI, you have like the entire, I mean, someone in the program was showing me like taking a book, shrinking it down to like the, a small chunk, and then creating it into a podcast to listen to you're in your car. And so it's like, for information, using and moving it around and editing it. And so it's like these fully, composable stacks that we're getting now. And I think it's going to be insane. I mean, I'm not sure how you guys are going to sleep over the next, months and years, but it's going to be a wild ride for sure.
Yeah, not very much is the answer.
Well, cool. I think I want to make sure we get you guys out on time and everything. I don't know if there's any other, questions in the chat that we missed. Rafa's hanging out behind the scenes here, making sure we're not missing anything. So if there's any other questions, Rafa, let us know that we should be covering. We have one. Oh, cool. You want to throw it up on the screen, maybe? Yeah. This one's for you, Jesse. Yeah.
What are you hoping to see soon in the development of blockchain? That isn't possible right now, but will be in the future, the Optimism Superchain stack. Oh, that's a good question. I think that so just for folks who maybe don't know, the superchain is this concept basically that we're going to have a bunch of layer 2s like Base and OP Mainnet and Zora Network that over time kind of integrate and become one holistic chain that have kind of seamless interoperability between them. And so I think that's probably less like the thing I'm most excited about is people starting to build experiences for users that kind of leverage that integration so that users aren't actually feeling like, oh man, I have to like balance being on X chain or Y chain and figuring out how to get funds across X chain or Y chain. But instead they just do the things that they want to do and everything just works out of the box. And so I think the best kind of like things that folks focus on now is building just those experiences that you want people to use. And then if you're building a wallet or you're building something kind of higher up the user experience stack, figuring out how do you start to pull the chain behind the scenes and make it so users are just getting access to the experience that they care about. And that's what we're focusing on a lot with Base. It's like, how do we make Base disappear and make the apps and experiences like really come front and center? And if you want to be building on Base, we'd love to support you in doing that. And so, yeah, I'm around. We have our team that's jumping in the Discord to support. So excited about all the folks who already are building on Base and excited to keep building with you all in the months and years ahead.
For sure. Thanks, Jesse. Connor, any last thoughts before we close out here?
Yeah, definitely treat just AI capability in general as like a skill that's really not that hard to develop and get started with. All the models that we produce are locally available, but you can still just run them via API to get started. So we've got a website, platform.stability.ai, and there's sandboxes there. So like really quickly, you can just jump in and start generating images or trying in painting. So really don't be afraid to approach the whole field. Like you can, within like a matter of 10 minutes or so, get some of these like incredibly powerful models just running in your project. So APIs are a good place to start for that if you're like getting your feet wet. And if you need more and more complicated stuff, you can move local over time. But yeah, just really, if you haven't tried it yet, generate your first image using a Stable Diffusion prompt. It's pretty addicting.
Generate your first image, mint it as an NFT on Base. Boom.
Yeah, just
you're
do
on
it.
chain.
Boom.
You're with AI. Get out there, get building.
100%. All right. I think that's a great way to end. Thank you both so much for the time. Super appreciate it. Really exciting to hear about all that you have going on. And yeah, we'll see you around for more Builder Energy.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Keep building.
All right.